Welcome, everyone. I call the June 1st, 2022 Planning Commission meeting to order. The main purposes of tonight's meeting are public hearings on the Canyon Park Transfer Development Rights Program and parking reductions near transit. Before we move on to the agenda items, I'd like to acknowledge our remote meeting format. As with our previous meetings, the commissioners and staff will be participating via Zoom. During this Zoom meeting, the chat and question functions are not available for use to ensure compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act. We have a public comment agenda item at the beginning of the meeting. This is time for comments on issues not on tonight's agenda. Please limit those comments to 3 minutes. We'll also be allowing comments during the 2 agenda items in the public hearing. So if you have comments about those specific issues, please hold for those agenda items. Pursuant to Mayor Thompson's proclamation of extension of local emergency dated May 31, 2022, this Planning Commission meeting will be conducted remotely through Zoom. Public comment will be allowed both in writing and orally. The Imagine Bothell notice, the city website, and tonight's agenda all provided information to the public for providing comments. People wishing to comment were instructed to notify staff or provide written comments by 3 p.m. today. The video of this meeting will be streamed live as well as recorded and available for later viewing on the city's YouTube channel. Call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone to listen live to the meeting. For our phone-in callers, during staff presentations, staff will make every effort to specify which materials they are referencing so everyone can follow along. Those who provided advance notice are able to make comments under the audience comment portion of the meeting. Email was encouraged as well and will be acknowledged. And to my knowledge, we have not received any email comments beyond the one letter, which was in the agenda packet. At this point, we'll take a moment to acknowledge the attendance of the commissioners. And commissioners, for the benefit of the newly appointed deputy director, please give a sentence or two about yourself and your interest in commission meetings. So I'll go in accordance with position number. I am position number 1, Kevin Kiernan, starting my second 2-year term as chair. I've been on the commission now 4 years. I am a retired civil engineer, 30 years in public projects, and look forward to applying that knowledge to the Planning Commission. Commissioner Dodd.
Thanks, Chair. Present. And my name is Amanda Dodd. I've been on the commission for about 2.5 years now. I grew up in Bothell, so I lived here for a couple decades now. And in my day job, I am a technical account manager at a software company. Thanks, and welcome to the city.
Commissioner Curd. Oh, Commissioner Westerbeck, I'm sorry, you're position 3.
Oh, it's fine, no worries. Welcome, Ashley. Glad to have you. My name is Carrie Westerbeck. I've been on the Planning Commission just over a year and a half, I think. I'm a local architect. I've also done some small development and built my projects as a general contractor. I also serve on the Snohomish County Habitat for Humanity Board. So I'm a jack of all trades, do multiple things. Glad to be here.
Commissioner Curd.
Present, and hello, I'm Karsten. I've been on the Planning Commission for 3 years now. I am a licensed geologist and I have a passion for critical areas. Day job, I am a planner in a neighboring jurisdiction. So nice to have you on board.
Commissioner Robson is absent and excused, and Commissioner Anders is also absent and excused. Commissioner Gustafson.
Hi, Sarah Gustafson here, Deputy Director Winchell. We're glad to have you on board. I am a CPA and mom of 3 kids, and I became a Bothell resident about 7 years ago. My interest in planning stems from my work with environmental organizations, both from the environmental impact and also from working with nonprofits where people can often not afford to live in the communities they serve. So I'm glad to be here working on the Planning Commission for the last 2 years.
So in addition to the commissioners, we have some city staff with us. Community Development Deputy Director Ashley Winchell, newly appointed, is with us. And Deputy Director, I know introductions are later in the agenda, but I think it'll flow better if we just roll right in now, if you want to say a few words.
I'm excited to be here. It's my first day. So planning commission meeting on the first day, just really jumping right in. But my name's Ashley Winchell. I am coming from the city of Linwood, where I was the planning manager for the last 3 years. And I started there as the senior planner. And then before that, I worked for a city in the Midwest for about 8 years. I'm really looking forward to working in Bothell and impressed with all of the implementation of the planning that's been done here, and looking forward to finding ways that we can continue all the progress and meet the needs of the community.
Welcome to Bothell. We also have Interim Director Jeff Smith with us. Jeff.
Thank you, Commissioner Kieran and Chairman Kieran. Jeff Smith, I am sitting currently in Michael's seat. As you guys, Michael went to Bellevue recently. You know that he took the job as the director in Bellevue, and I was the Development Services Manager, which was the kind of the oldish title of Ashley's new job. So we're morphing a few things around the department. But I've been with the city of Bothell 30 years now. So I've been around a long time. And some of you have seen me in various places or spaces. And it's good to see you all again. And we're excited to have Ashley on board. We're getting the band back together, and hopefully that we will have a very successful run on the next phase in Bothell and planning, and carrying out the things that you guys work on and the things that you guys address. So appreciate it very much. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you both. Again, Deputy Director Winchell, welcome to Bothell. We look forward to having you work with us as appropriate, and look forward to your leadership. We also have Senior Planners Dave Boyd and Nathan Lamb in attendance for their agenda items. So, gentlemen, good to have you as well. So lastly, before we begin, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking, and unmute before you speak. If you are also streaming the live video feed, please turn the sound off as there is a delay. For commissioners, at breaks during the presentation, I'll be calling on members who wish to speak or ask a question. If you wish to speak, please indicate this by holding up yellow speaker cards or using the raise hand function, and I'll do my best to recognize you as soon as I can. This will help avoid the problem of having two people speaking at the same time. Identify yourself before you ask a question, make a motion, second a motion, or participate in debate. And please mute your microphone when not speaking. So the first item on the agenda is public comment pursuant to Mayor Thompson's proclamation of extension of local emergency dated May 31st, 2022. This meeting will be conducted remotely through Zoom. The city has accepted visitor comment in writing, as well as accepted sign-up sheets for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. Written comments submitted to staff no later than 3 p.m. today were forwarded to all commissioners, and as I noted, we have not received any forwarded comments. Senior Planner Lamb, is there anyone on the line who wishes to speak in the public comment period?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. We didn't receive any written comments, but we did receive a request prior to 3 to speak on the TDR item this evening. So I think the next public comment period for that item would be the appropriate time to have our guest in attendance speak on that.
All right. Well, thank you. So we'll invite that individual in during the public hearing on that item. So with that, we'll move on to the next agenda item. It is approval of the minutes. We have before us the minutes of the May 18th meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to.
Commissioner Dodd, I saw you first.
I move to approve the minutes.
Commissioner Westerbeck, would you like to second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
All right. Thank you. The minutes have been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion around the minutes? I actually do have a comment on the minutes. I believe the minutes are intended to reflect actions taken by the commission. And the commission did adopt a motion at the last meeting to form an ad hoc committee to draft a letter. And I do believe that should be reflected in the minutes.
Yeah, that sounds right, Mr. Chairman. So what it sounds like is we need an amendment to those to the minutes, and I believe it's as easy as saying that much, and then would bring them back next time for approval, or they could be approved with the amendment. Dave, do you recall the last time this happened? What the commission did?
Yeah, if the commission would like to suggest language to be added now, we can do that. Otherwise, we could bring them back next time with that addition.
So we would need a motion to amend the minutes to reflect the formation of an ad hoc committee for the purpose of drafting a letter. Is there a motion? Commissioner Dodd.
Thank you. I move to amend the minutes to reflect that we did vote to form an ad hoc committee to write a letter in support of capturing the voices of renters and non-homeowners during the CFP process.
All right, thank you. And I believe that motion was moved by Commissioner Dodd. Is there a second to that motion?
I will second the motion.
Commissioner Westerbeck.
Create the ad hoc committee.
Okay, so it has been moved and seconded that we revise the minutes of the previous meeting to reflect that there was a motion to create an ad hoc committee to reflect the voices of renters. All in favor of that motion? Okay, I see all commissioners present raising their hands in agreement with that. Senior Planner Boyd.
I just wanted to ask at what point in the meeting was that done? Was that during reports from members?
No, it was, let's see.
New business?
No. I cleaned up my work area, so I don't have the previous agenda. It was around the, well, let me see if I can scroll down there. It was, I believe it was during the study session on the comprehensive plan scoping. Does that sound correct? Because we wanted to be sure we had that voice during the comprehensive plan process.
Okay, so we can add it there to the minutes.
Yeah, so during that study session, there was a motion.
Okay, great.
Is that sufficient language to have us then just move to adopt the minutes right now?
As amended, yes.
As amended. All right, so is there a motion then to adopt the minutes as amended? Commissioner Dodd.
I'm going to be that person. I think we need to, because we haven't voted on my original motion, right? So I think I need to make an amendment to my motion, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm pretending to be a parliamentarian today, I guess. So I would move to amend my motion, friendly amendment, to say we adopt the minutes as amended in our last motion. Gosh, I hope that passes muster.
You can accept the amendment as a friendly amendment, and then we can vote on the motion.
Okay. I believe Commissioner Dodd indicated she accepted the amendment as a friendly amendment. Okay, so then we would move to vote on the motion to approve the minutes of the May 18th meeting as amended. All in favor? All right, all five participating commissioners did vote to amend the minutes as to adopt the minutes as amended. Thank you all. That was a little test at the beginning of the meeting. So hopefully we passed muster. Moving on, the item of new business was introduction of the new community development director and interim director, but it felt like it worked smoother to have all our introductions up front. So I think we'll move on and consider that item completed. That brings us to the main purposes of the meeting, our public hearings. The first public hearing is the Canyon Park Transfer of Development Rights Program. And I'd like to get that started. Senior Planner Lamb.
Yep, and just to note, it is a public hearing this evening as opposed to a study session early last month. And we did have one guest with us today that wanted to speak on this item, and I believe the proper order is for the attendee to give public comment first and then proceed with the public hearing item. Is that correct?
I think I have my...
We typically take public
Bylaws.
comment after the staff presentation and any clarifying
Okay.
questions.
Yeah, we open the public hearing, which we have done. Staff submits for the record your materials,
Okay.
and then we accept public comments.
I can-
Appropriate.
I can get us rolling. I think I'm flashing back to Virginia where we used to do the opposite. So let me go ahead and pull up the presentation for this evening.
Well, my first 2 years as chair, I didn't use the bylaws at all, and I've used them now, I think 3 times in the last 2 months. So I'll keep them close at hand.
Okay, so just to dive right in, and I'll try to be brief tonight. We are looking for a continuance on this item. This is following the May 4th study session for TDR in Canyon Park. Our original intent was to get a recommendation from the Planning Commission this evening to forward to City Council for their consideration to adopt the proposed code language, but I'm going to go over a couple points in the presentation for why we need a little bit more time to refine where we're at, and make one. I did make one change on the fly, but we'll give you a heads up at the end for the motion that staff is looking for tonight. So with that being said, we do have, for the sake of our audience who's getting up to speed on this item, we have commissioners that are very familiar with this, but it's still vague to some. So we always spend a little bit of time reviewing. So for this project that we've been working on for a little over a year now, we have a guiding policy that was adopted as part of the sub-area Canyon Park sub-area plan late 2020 that tells us to create an activity unit transfer of development rights program to retain our capacity for jobs and population, which is a requirement for our regional growth center with the Puget Sound Regional Council Center designation framework and criteria. So that's where this all started. This is only for essential public facilities. It's not open for private development. This is just for these essential public facilities that don't meet our minimum development requirements that were established as part of the sub-area regulations concurrently with the sub-area plan. And we had a unique opportunity to use Sound Transit's bus-based North Site as a case study for transfer of development rights in a different format than people are used to seeing it. It's typically used for conservation, but here we're using it in more of an urban format. And I should mention too, this has been a collaborative partnership between Sound Transit and Burke Consulting and the city. We've all been working together, and I'm going to go over that here in a bit. And I do need to mention that we do have a Sound Transit staff member here tonight in case there's any questions that specifically regarding Bus Space North, and that's Gary Yao. He's a senior current planner And he's who we've been working with closely and been doing the project management on Sound Transit side for this case study. Okay, so we had a phase 1 feasibility study. We're now in phase 2, and that's the final phase of the project. And under the feasibility study, we determined that TDR is feasible and that certificates associated with development rights are valuable, but they need some additional incentives. And we've spent some time talking about that. And the other part of it was that we took away from that feasibility study is that it's really a long-term strategy. It's not something that's probably going to get picked up right away. It sort of depends on property values and rents increasing in the sub area once BRT comes online and those transportation facilities in the future. Some recommendations that came out of that report was that the city should operate as a public ownership model, and that's consistent with that guiding policy that I mentioned that's in the sub-area plan. So we wanted to be able to act as a bank and a broker for TDR certificates and be able to direct them that in ways that accomplish affordable housing and transportation-oriented development goals within the sub-area. And this last point here, receiving sites, putting receiving sites in high and medium density zones in the sub-area is also consistent with that guiding policy. And actually that's sort of where we need to do a little more work, and I'm gonna talk about that a little bit more here. Before I do that, I did want to follow up on some public engagement that we had. We did let you know that we discussed this program with our Development Services Advisory Group that's convened by our development review staff on a quarterly basis. And we told you what feedback we heard from them. They did say that, TDR programs can be kind of nebulous, and they tend to stay away from them because they can't really they can't make it pencil. And so that's one of the goals that we've been working towards with this draft code that's before you tonight, to make it as straightforward and streamlined as possible. Something new is that we did meet with the Canyon Park Business Center Owners Association just in the last couple of weeks. They are a key stakeholder in the sub area, and as a result, we wanted to run this by them and get some feedback from them. They did raise some concerns about some of the traffic impact analysis that we've done so far, and we still have a little bit to do with regard to level of service as a result of shifting growth from one super block in the sub area to another. And so we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. Another update for you is our draft SEPA addendum, and that was included in your packet. It was an attachment to the findings, conclusions, and recommendation. I want to underscore that it is in draft form, and we are most likely going to be making some amendments to it before we bring it back to you based on further transportation analysis. But so far, the conclusions of the SEPA addendum, which is an addendum to the final EIS that was contemplated for the sub-area plan itself, was that building volume would be greater on receiving sites equivalent to the allowed but unused capacity on sending sites, such that total growth would be similar to that studied in the final EIS. And that's a little wordy, but it's just a way of saying that, there's no hardly any impact from moving growth from one super block to another. There's no growth associated with it because the final EIS already contemplated a threshold, and we're simply taking it from one location and moving it to another. And then also the TDR proposal is not anticipated to result in impacts beyond that of the EIS. So I've just covered that. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. One other update that should have been new to you in your packet. All of the draft code we brought you at the study session is the same as we brought it to you before. This was the only update. We did catch something in the dimensional table for the Canyon Park sub-area regulations. And we're simply just making a revision where you see the highlight that allows project to exceed maximum FAR with incentives. So when these regulations were adopted, you can see on the first row, we have the minimum floor area ratio, which is why we're doing this program in the first place. For transfer development rights, the Bus Space North isn't meeting the minimum required. But there's also maximum base FARs in that next row that were established. And on the third row, there's a provision that allows a development to exceed maximum FAR so long as they use incentives. And this section 1248-150 is for the mandatory affordable, like 10% set aside for affordable units. And it might have been at the time of adoption that the intent was to include incentives in that section, but we do have two reserve sections, one for TDR and another for bonus floor area incentives, which we started to work on last year, but shifted our focus to TDR. So this just revises that and makes it clear where the incentives are in our code. They're not in the affordable housing or mandatory affordable provisions. Okay, some other updates from the May 4th meeting. You all had some questions and concerns I just wanted to follow up on. It was expressed that there really should be a fee for admin time spent on how complicated an interlocal agreement could be to actually put this code to use and accommodate an essential public facility that's coming in under the threshold, the minimum threshold. And staff all agrees, and Sound Transit was cooperative and agreed. And that isn't going to be determined right now, but we can include it in the code so that we can administratively set a fee at a later time. And it would be commensurate with sort of the complexity of the interlocal agreement between a essential public facility developer and the city. It really shouldn't be the same for each, treated the same for each proposal. One of the other questions was who would keep the proceeds if the city was to sell certificates to somebody that was willing to use them. And we did establish that the city, as the bank and broker, would control those proceeds and direct them to affordable housing. And that's for Bus Space North, that's consistent with what's required by the RCWs for surplus property for regional transit authorities. It was also mentioned that it seemed like the banking system might have been a little more complex than it needed to be. And so I think there was some sentiment that maybe direct transfers we need to beef up that section in our code. And we haven't done any work on this front yet. And I think this needs to have some more discussion later based on that prior concern for who controls the proceeds. Certainly if the city was the bank and had certificates, I think we'd have more discretion in how we direct the credits for what kind of projects and where the proceeds would go for the development we want to see in the sub area. And then this affordability menu was mentioned, maybe using the proceeds for projects with those deeper affordability levels that we've discussed. And that really wouldn't belong in the code. That would be more in line with the interlocal agreement. So we'll have that discussion with Sound Transit, and we started to, but like I said, that doesn't really belong in the code. That would be more in the ILA. Okay, getting towards the end here. So you do have some draft findings, conclusions, and recommendations tonight. And if anybody would like to propose amendments to those tonight, that's fine. There is a recommendation that, like I mentioned, we were hoping to have tonight, but we're simply just not ready yet, and asking for more time to allow the interested parties to review the code and some of the administrative processes that we have that we're working on as well. And so for the next steps, and I actually did not change this. I didn't update this like I thought I did. I updated the bottom part. So we were looking for a continuance to the June 15th meeting, but based on some internal discussion just today, actually, we'd really like to see the public hearing continued to July 6th, when we can bring you some more polished proposed code language. We don't anticipate any substantive changes. They're really just making it clearer for essential public facilities to use in the future, because right now it could be perceived that some of the language is more tailored towards us getting to an interlocal agreement with Sound Transit, and we want it to be flexible so that if this needs to be used again, it can. And we also need to finish and update that that draft SEPA addendum. And so we need time to work on that with our consultant and sub-consultants. So ignore the top part here, but our recommended motion for this evening for the commission is to move to continue the public hearing to the July 6th regularly scheduled meeting. And with that, I'll take questions, and I do have the code that we looked at last time available to pull up to if anyone wants to take a closer look at that. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and open it up for questions.
All right, thank you, Senior Planner Lamb. So what I'd like to do first is have clarifying questions from commissioners, if any, and then public comment. I understand we have a person who'd like to speak, and then move on to the findings, conclusions, and recommendations. So commissioners, questions, comments? Commissioner Gustafson.
Hi, Sarah Gustafson here. I appreciate the blue notes throughout the text of the amendments. That helps translate it into plain language. I do have a question on page 11 of the packet. I think it's 2C, where it says, nothing in this subsection shall require that a reasonable use exception equal the economic value of the development credits granted. And I was wondering if you could help me understand better what that means. Sorry.
Sure, let me, bear with me while I find that code section. Did you say it was C2?
Right.
C2? Okay, give me just a second.
Page 11, C2, C, and I'm kind of wondering what are the two things being compared here?
Okay, so see, that's C1. Bear with me here just a moment. Okay, this isn't cooperating. Let me try this. Bear with me just a moment.
Sure, and I can.
Was it regarding, and I'm sorry, I missed the entire statement. Was it regarding the reasonable use exception?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I found it. Let me share that so everyone can see.
Yeah, I think it's saying that the value of the exception and the value of the credits don't exactly need to be the same number. So I'm wondering if that's the case. And
I might have to go back and look at this one. We did have some discussion. I think the idea was to keep it simple and not have a site be eligible if they had been granted a reasonable use exception, to avoid like double dipping of
Okay.
sorts. Did I provide annotated text with that? And with the blue? Okay, actually, no, I didn't. So let me follow up with you. We discussed it, and I don't think we had. We're still the discussion is still open on that provision.
Okay.
That's actually one of the provisions that we're still working on tailoring. So let me get back to you on that.
Okay, that makes
I
sense.
appreciate the question. Thank you.
All right, other commissioners, Commissioner Westerbeck.
Thank you, Senior Planner Lamb and Chair Kiernan. We discussed very briefly last time, and I read the packet today, but I did read it kind of quickly, so I might not have caught every detail. I was curious last time, and I'm not sure if this applies, if Sound Transit, for example, creates these credits and they just languish and they're never used, then they've essentially, enjoyed not building to the maximum required in that location, and then no one's picked up the credits and used them. Is there any sort of recourse for that, where the Sound Transit or the public organization would have to make that up somehow, or pay something? Or I don't know if we have a mechanism for that at all. I'm just kind of curious, since we do have with the Development Services Advisory Group saying, hey, they're kind of sticky to use. We're not sure we like them. And plus they only apply to certain kinds of projects. Are they going to be so difficult to use that no one uses them? And then we will have not gotten what we wanted out of that, an area that's specified for more density. So again, it might be too complex to fit in it's already getting to be a pretty substantial piece of code, but thought I'd ask about that.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I know that there's a sunset provision that we've discussed being in the interlocal agreement, and it's consistent with the horizon is 20 years, consistent with a comp plan update. And we did also discuss as part of that interlocal agreement, and as you pointed out, not in the code, but in the ILA, that if there was no uptake of the certificates, that the cost of them would need to be reevaluated, so that they're to sort of spur uptake and create, try to make a market for it. But in the code, no, and that's a good point. So I'm going to take that back to the team and consider adding some language for that in an appropriate place.
Sure.
Because, sorry, go ahead.
Apologies. No, my apologies.
No, I was just going to say, because you make a good point. It could, if it's not included now, then that would be something we might have to do later for the next essential public facility use that might have to use this program. So yeah, point well taken.
And you make a good point that it could just be that, we have to make them a little more attractive. Okay, it's been a few years, no one's picking these up. Do we make them more powerful to the person the receiving site? So that's a good point as well. It could just be that ratio needs to be adjusted. Okay, no one's taking these. What do we do about that? Thank you. Appreciate that.
Sure thing. I'll take it to the team and see if we can't craft some language to propose to y'all and let you know what was decided internally.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you both. Other commissioner questions or comments? Seeing none, Senior Planner Lamb, do we have public comments?
Yeah, let me invite Molly into the room to give her an opportunity to speak. Okay, Molly, if you can hear us, this is the public comment portion for TDR, and you'll have 3 minutes, I believe, and I'll start the clock now.
Thanks very much for your time this evening, Nathan and Commissioners. We appreciate the opportunity. My name is Molly Lawrence. Let me see if I can put the camera in the right spot. I am Land Use Counsel from the law firm of Van Ness Feldman to the Canyon Park Business Center Owners Association. I think of the folks on this call, Jeff Smith and I have probably been with the city the longest. Jeff and I worked on Canyon Park issues together for decades. I want to appreciate Nathan coming to the Canyon Park Business Center board meeting last week. There was a little bit of a snafu in terms of attendance. So I'm thinking that there are more folks who are interested in this. But I wanted to at least come tonight and express our initial concerns with the TDR proposal. Unsurprisingly, or maybe to most of you who've seen me before or heard us testify related to the Canyon Park sub-area plan, that our most significant concern remains traffic. I think the initial comment made to us about this was that this TDR would reduce traffic in the park, so it should be something we were supportive of. When we dug a little bit deeper into the Fair and Piers memo, and actually, let me just, I can't share my screen. If you go to the Fair and Piers memo, table 1, you will actually see that the transfer of development rights actually, for all 4 scenarios, actually makes the road situation worse for the park in several ways. The main entrance to the Canyon Park Business Center is 220th and 527. And in each scenario, the delay gets longer at that intersection to well over 2 minutes of delay for people trying to come in and out of the park. The scenario 4, which would be the additional development across 527 in that large block, in that scenario, the LOS at the 224th and 527 goes from LOSD with a 53-second delay and the preferred alternative in the EIS to 141.5 seconds. So we are concerned. We appreciate the sentiment that this improves traffic within the park, but it clearly creates some additional transportation impacts outside of the park that have a direct impact on operators within the park. One conversation that I should refer to as Mr. Lamb, excuse me, we had was about whether or not there was any additional mitigation proposed to offset these effects, and thus far we've heard of nothing having been identified. It's the city's intent, as I understand it, through the draft addendum, to essentially assert that the impacts from the TDR are within the range of impacts that were addressed in the planned action EIS, and consequently to say that anybody who qualifies for a planned action under that EIS wouldn't have to do any additional mitigation for these additional impacts. So that is, unsurprisingly a concern for us. It's sort of it continues to be more traffic on the roadways that are critical to the operation of the park without mitigation. There are a couple of questions, I think, outstanding from our conversation. There's a mention in the traffic analysis and in the addendum that there could be quote unquote adjustments to operations that could achieve the same LOS standards as the EIS. I don't know that that's been identified, what those are, but we're interested in understanding what changes might be proposed to the roadways and to the operations of the roadways to try to stay within the LOS delays identified in the EIS. Another big concern that we raised when we talked to Mr. Lamb was the concurrency issue, right? You have multiple intersections now falling at LOSF, which is below your concurrency threshold. To my knowledge, the city has not advanced effort or advanced discussions of lowering your LOS requirement from E to F. So my concern a little bit here is that you are claiming that this would be used for affordable housing, and yet you're saddling the affordable housing developer with substantial concurrency projects. And I don't understand how that's been addressed. The last comment I will make is that I think the ascending site figure is confusing. Right now it shows the entirety of of block 7, the super block from the Canyon Park sub area. It's the last page of the transportation memo. I think when Mr. Lamb put the figure up, he showed that it was just a bus base north site, which is the vacant lot within that super block. But if this is intended only to be for central public facilities, it seems that that sending site should be tightened down to the bus base location rather than being the entirety of the super block. So it sounds like we are sort of all on the same page, that there needs to be some additional analysis and some additional study of this before it's ready to go forward. Our biggest concern, unsurprisingly, remains traffic and how the city is managing traffic from the various standards that it is imposing. And this is kind of the latest example from our perspective of an idea that the city wants to implement, and we understand it and we appreciate the effort, but you do need to deal with the transportation impacts that you create by your proposals.
All right, thank you, Ms. Lawrence. As you heard, we are intending to continue this public hearing. If you wish to put any of those comments in writing, your oral comments are part of the record. We've heard them and appreciate that. You're also welcome to supplement them if you'd like. So thank you.
Thank you.
Senior Planner Lamb, any other members of the public who wish to comment?
No, Mr. Chairman, not tonight. And I did just want to quickly respond to Ms. Lawrence, and I wanted to say thank you. Those are valid concerns with regard to the language in the addendum and the LOS intersection analysis that was done, and that's something that we're going to be looking at when we bring the addendum back to you. And we do owe Ms. Lawrence and the association some follow-up, and we're working on that right now. So we'll be going back to look at those impacts where they're minor and where they're more significant, and also provide an explanation to how that compares to the city standard, which isn't for the level of service standards for corridors and not for intersections. And so we need to add that analysis to our addendum. And so we will bring that back to you. And that's all I have this evening. And I can put the recommended motion back up if it's needed. Thank you.
Well, in a moment, any commissioner questions or comments following up based on what we heard from Ms. Lawrence? See Commissioner Dodd first, then Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, thank you. This is more of a little more generic, but can you clarify level of service as a measurement? This is specifically just with car travel, right? Not any other mode of travel through the sub area?
Yeah, that's correct. And I'm not going to, so I can't speak to LOS intelligently. I'll lean on Dave Boyd, but yeah, it's with regard to traffic. And one of the significant things that we're going to be considering for the comprehensive plan update with regard to the transportation element is the metrics of LOS and measuring it differently so that it's not just auto-centric, but focused on other modes of transportation. So I'm going to let Dave, Senior Planner Boyd, weigh in. I'm going to tap him to be a little more informative than me. Thank you.
Well, I'm afraid I'm not an expert on LOS either, but it is true that for concurrency, we base level of service on corridor level of service, not individual intersection. So that it's possible that some additional analysis may need to be done to translate that.
Makes sense. I appreciate it. I can't speak for the whole commission, obviously, but judging it based just on car traffic is not how I want to look at the future in Bothell. Obviously, we want to encourage lots of other kinds of transportation. We've talked a lot about our bike plan. So I would not want to see us get hung up on that one measure as we look at this. So any other context you can provide would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, and if I can, Mr. Chairman, just to add on, there was some comments that I overlooked addressing. So with regard to Ms. Lawrence's comment about the super block being one designated site, we can make the map a little bit clearer because it is intended that it's just the bus space north site to be the sending site, not the entire super block. And then with regard to the level of service requirement, and actually, I'm getting mixed up on comments here. So let me yield the time back and not get ahead of myself. So hopefully that added bit of context was helpful. But if it pops back up, I'll chime in again. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I believe there was another commissioner comment. Commissioner Gustafson.
Hi, Sarah Gustafson here. First, thanks, Commissioner Dodd, for that great question. I am really paying attention to what Ms. Lawrence said about the difficulty of getting inside the business park. I think it's really important. Job center, we all appreciate businesses of the park. At the same time, I am thinking that it might be almost inevitable that this additional density is going to be transferred to that area. What Ms. Lawrence said that was really interesting was talking about mitigation options, changing the operations of the roadways around the park. So given that the density might be inevitable, what are some other mitigation options that have even been considered or on the table, and how have the business park owners responded to that?
And that's you jogged my memory, and that's great question, because that's the follow-up that we owe the owners association is what requirements there would be as part of mitigation. And so we're discussing that with our public works department, and they're well aware of it, and we'll be happy to provide updates on that at probably the next public hearing. And you did jog my memory about the trips in the business park. It may be semantics here. Ms. Lawrence did raise a valid concern with intersection performance, but we are talking about moving trips outside of the business park, and I do want to be clear about that. When you look at the map, the receiving locations are outside of the business park, but again, those are valid concerns about level of service at intersections and within the corridors. So the updated addendum will speak to those issues. The addendum and the analysis that's an attachment to it. Thanks.
All right, other commissioner questions or comments? All right, so we are going to continue this public hearing. I would like us to take a look at the findings, conclusions, and recommendations, recognizing they'll be coming back to us, but to give staff any feedback we have on them as they are. So seeking a little advice on parliamentary procedure. Should we continue it and then talk about those, or keep it open until we complete that discussion? Or is it a distinction without a difference?
I would go ahead and do that discussion and then continue.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Senior Planner Boyd. So Senior Planner Lamb, can you bring up the commission findings, conclusions, and recommendations? Oops, I think is that?
Okay, here they are under 6 specific findings, A, B, and C.
Okay, so again, recognizing these will all come to us again before our final action, but if there are any elements here that we want staff to do additional work on, I think it'd be good to give them that direction right now. So the first one goes to amending section 12.48.130. that road that was discussed. We find the existing reference section needs to be revised. Any comments on that particular section? I'm not seeing anybody raised to the. All right, let's move to the second one then. B refers to amending the floor area ratio calculations, amending to reflect the intent to treat essential public facilities not meeting the requirements and giving the director discretion over the floor area to be transferred. Referring to placeholder language here. Questions or comments regarding that? All right, again, scrolling up and down, I'm not seeing anyone. The final is pretty straightforward. It just updates previously reserved section. Find it in accordance. And again, this is really key. We want to retain the activity units in the regional growth center. If we can't get them in one place, we want to get them somewhere else within that center. So I think that's what we're saying here. Questions or comments to that? All right. Oh, Commissioner Gustafson.
Hi, Sarah Gustafson here. I'm wondering if this would be the appropriate place to reference the idea that you, Chair Kiernan, brought up earlier about routing the credit directly to the developer to build affordable housing instead of using the certificate process. I feel like that might need to be reflected here as well as some of the other findings. I feel like we've had a bit of a very juicy debate and I don't quite see it reflected here. And I'm wondering if that might belong here.
Yes, we did talk a lot about an interest in achieving the goal as simply as possible. Other thoughts on that? Oops. I'm gonna have to scroll between screens. It takes me a while to get to the ribbon. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else.
If there's no comments, Mr. Chairman, if I could just weigh in.
Sure.
That is a good recommendation, and I'm sure we could add some language here to beef this section up, this finding up, and add to it. The hang up with the direct transfer is really it's the RCWs, and actually it's a good thing for the city because our interest is in providing affordable housing. And so direct transfers are to qualified entities only. So like a housing authority or the city, and any of the other qualified entities that are listed in the RCWs. And so that kind of allows that direct transfer to us as acting as a bank. And then we are able to direct those certificates by either transferring or selling them and using the proceeds to basically subsidize affordable housing projects in the sub area. And so I would just caution going towards direct transfers from an essential public facility development to someone to like a private developer that might be willing to use them, but where we don't have as much discretion as to how those credits are used. So let me discuss that with our team and see if we can find a good balance and add some language here. And we'll bring that back to you as proposed language in the draft next time.
All right, thank you. I think if there is a way to facilitate that transfer as simply as possible, and hearing that part of the concern is that this is complicated, it takes time is money, slows things down. If we can be more efficient and keeping in mind that an important goal is affordability, I think we'd like to reflect that. There's been a lot of discussion on the commission about that. And if to the extent we're talking about what our findings and recommendations are, we'd like to see that included, I believe. So a little bit of head shaking on that. So again, this will come back to us. We'll have an opportunity again. So just wanted to get on the table things we'd like you to talk more about. So we'll just pause on conclusions. I don't think there's anything too dramatic in there. They've been noticed, they're necessary, and they're in the best interest. So those are our conclusions, and then the recommendations are to act upon them. Any discussion on these then? Any further discussion? Seeing none, is there a motion to continue this public hearing to July 6th? Commissioner Curd.
Thanks. I wanted to recognize that I think we still have a participant. Is the participant from Sound Transit looking to speak tonight before we close or we continue the public hearing?
Not tonight. Gary was on standby. Senior Planner Gary was on standby for Sound Transit related questions, but I'd like to reserve him and the consultant for the next public hearing so that y'all can ask them any questions that you might have.
Understood. Great. Thanks. So with that, I guess I move to continue the public hearing on this agenda item to July 6th.
Is there a second? Commissioner Dodd.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we continue this public hearing on Canyon Park Transfer of Development Rights Program to July 6th. All in favor? I see all 5 commissioners participating, voting in favor of that motion. So we will continue this public hearing until July 6th. We'll look forward to hearing from you again on that, Senior Planner Lamb.
Yes, thank you very much for the feedback. We do appreciate it, and it'll inform our additional analysis. So thank you.
Yes, and thank you for your presentation. We do appreciate it. Very informative, as always. Senior Planner Boyd, would you like to talk with us about parking reductions near transit?
Yes, thank you. And I will also share my screen and have a brief presentation.
So we will open the public hearing on parking reductions with your presentation.
Okay. Are you able to see that? Okay. So this is the initial public hearing, and as with the previous item, we are not proposing that Planning Commission take action or make a recommendation this evening, but we do want to present. This is the first time in this discussion, and we have had several study sessions on this item that we've actually presented draft code amendments. And one reason that we are suggesting that this be continued as well is that we need to do a little more internal vetting of those code amendments. We've had some discussions with our development review staff, still need to do have some legal review done, but we did want to move the ball forward a bit and thought that it made sense to go ahead with this initial public hearing. So some of this is going to be repeat for Planning Commission. This is also for benefit of anyone who might be viewing for the first time. Including our deputy director. So the purpose here is to expand provisions for reduced parking requirements near transit. We passed some state mandated reductions near transit in 2000, and Planning Commission proposed extending the provisions for market rate housing from to a half mile from the quarter mile mandated by state. The staff and council wanted to pause on that in order to take a look at whether there was a nexus for including some affordable housing requirements with that expansion beyond the state mandate. We also wanted to consider additional reductions in some cases as justified by a parking study. Again, any additional reductions would at least include consideration of affordable housing provisions. On that last slide. So the map here shows the bus stops that meet the state mandate definition for frequent transit, which is basically, and they had different definitions for different categories, but basically between 2 and 4 stops per hour for a continuous 12-hour period. And the pink circles are quarter mile radii, and the orange is a half mile radii. I also want to use this as to respond to comments that we've received that in some cases those half mile radiuses extend beyond freeways and rivers and really don't reflect walking distance. And we've had a discussion, although with the state mandated requirements, Planning Commission chose to go with the radii to cover the maximum ground. We in the discussions and planning in study sessions leading up to this, we have agreed that the applicant would have to demonstrate that their project is within a quarter or half mile walking distance of those frequent transit stops. So this is some additional analysis that we presented at the last study session. And so these are all of the bus stops in the city of Bothell now. And we've talked a little bit about the 2020 state mandate reductions, but there are also transit-related parking reductions that date back to the 90s, and they are based on the number of runs during morning and afternoon rush hour, and they apply just to a 660-foot radius, which is 1/8 of a mile. So the darker purple circles indicate those 1/8 mile radii, and the amount of reduction is a percentage per run. So it's a sliding scale. So all of these stops provide some reduction, but it can vary from and max out at 20% reduction. And we've also added provisions that remove areas like downtown and Canyon Park, where we've already made parking reductions into their parking requirements. So the initial thought was the state mandated reductions and the older reductions wouldn't apply to those areas. But we also have heard that there are projects particularly in downtown, that have been interested in additional parking reductions and have indicated a willingness to do parking studies to achieve parking reduction. And currently, our code does not provide that. So that's one thing that we are trying to address. And also, it's worth noting that in Canyon Park, that's where we first established affordability provisions, partly based on the parking reductions that were done. That was not part of the standard practice that was used when we made the parking reductions in the downtown plan. So we did not do that in the downtown. We have since applied it in the general downtown corridor affordable housing overlay, and will continue to do so moving forward. So some of the issues that we've discussed, and this is just a kind of to highlight on it, is to consider there's support for considering future transit, the sound transit, bus rapid transit could consolidate some downtown stops, so it might change the map to some degree, although we think it'll still be fairly consistent with what's shown here. The extension of the community transit Swift Green Line could add frequent stops along the Bothell Everett Highway and Bothell Way between Canyon Park and downtown. And beyond those, there was support for considering areas where we would like to see better transit, particularly around some of our activity centers. So in the Green Star, that's a likely spot for a future Swift stop. And the blue stops are activity centers where we might want to encourage better transit by allowing some denser development. Fortunately, those are all areas that currently have some bus service and therefore qualify for those older transit reductions. And the code amendments in the packet do provide one way to use those existing stops and expand upon them to create further parking reductions to encourage growth and affordable housing in those areas. So I wanted to just focus on a couple of things. There's been quite a bit of talk in our study sessions about their support for reducing parking requirements citywide and about implementing some parking management strategies, both in the downtown sub area and citywide. And the discussion has been that both of those things are outside the scope of these code amendments, but we've said that we can draft findings as part of these that will go to City Council, and we could go one step further and make those into additional recommendations beyond the code amendments, but a recommendation that Council seriously consider both of these issues. So I've included the text that was included in the findings here on this image. I'm not going to go into it in detail here, but we can do that in the discussion following this. And one item that was discussed at the last study session that I haven't addressed in the code amendments was where we do allow reductions as justified by a parking study. Should we also apply some parking management requirements for that private development so that they are tracking and monitoring their parking and addressing things like spillover parking. So I would entertain questions and comments on the draft findings, but I just have a couple of more slides here, so I'm going to go ahead and finish this, and then we can come back to that. And the proposed amendments that you're seeing for the first time, basically, the main concept is to establish a tiered system. So we already have some parking reductions, and both in the older transit-related reductions and in the more recent state-mandated reductions that are already in the code, already are an entitlement that's there and allowed by right. And so we've expanded on that to some extent, and I've just used a couple of the examples in the table here. And then the third tier then would be deeper reductions as justified by a parking study and accompanied by affordable housing requirements. And I've taken the code language, which basically tries to describe all of this in paragraph form, and put it into a table that with the hope that this is a more easily understood way of showing the different reductions that are available. So that's the other major area that I'd like feedback from the commission on this evening. So with that, next steps would be any clarifying questions and comments on the presentation, accepting public testimony if there is any, although I don't believe we have anyone waiting to testify, and then deliberations and direction to staff on the questions that I identified, and any other issues that the commission would like to weigh in on, and then a motion to continue the hearing to July 20th in this case. So with that, I will stop sharing. I have the agenda available, so if the commission wants to go to the agenda packet and go on, do any page-by-page review, we can do that, or we can keep it a little more high-level discussion. So.
All right, thank you, Senior Planner Boyd. And again, recognizing this will come back to us. Are there any clarifying questions or comments to what we have heard this evening? Parking is usually a big hit with us. Nothing? I've got one, and could you go back to that table you just showed us? Just help me make sure I know what you're saying there. So up one. So saying qualified transit run, I guess. So that's number of stops per day. Oh, muted.
All right. When I'm sharing, the unmute is in a different place. There currently in the code, there are two different definitions for qualified transit runs. And so that's one reason this table does include a lot of footnotes.
Yes.
And I know there are some folks that are not big fans of tables with lots of footnotes, but it was a way to keep the language in the table as concise as possible, and then in the footnote describe those terms. So the current reductions that apply in types 1 and 2 on this table are based on the number of transit runs in the morning and afternoon peak periods. So the proposal here is to keep that the same, not change that existing entitlement. And in the case of number 2 here, and in number 1, which is basically for commercial development, all of our focus here has been on residential development. So at this point, we're not proposing any parking reductions for commercial development. But in 2, we are providing an option for going beyond what the current code does allow, and the maximum 20%, just for discussion purposes, takes the existing 2.2 spaces per unit down to 1.74, about 1 3/4 space per unit. And then with justified through a parking study, then you could go to these lower levels in option 1, which are, again, we haven't fully vetted these numbers, but these are similar to what has been discussed and studied in the phase 1 parking study for downtown, for example. And the language does say as low as, but the parking study will need to demonstrate that that the parking demand goes low. So if the parking study shows that they need 1.9 spaces for studios and 1 bedrooms, then that would be what would be allowed.
Okay, but again, the definition of qualified transit run, if there's a bus line, let's say the 372 runs down the road, there's a bus stop within the radius, and 4 times in the morning or 5 times in the morning and 5 times in the evening it stops at that stop, then you get the 10 stops, get you your 40%. That's number of times the bus actually. And is it any bus line, or is there anything else to qualified transit run other than the bus stops there?
Well, for now, since our only transit is bus, that's it.
Okay.
Although it does say transit run, so if we did get any other type of transit, that would qualify. So that's for the basic reduction under these under number 2. When we go to the modifications under the state mandated, then the qualified transit run is based on that 2 to 4 stops per hour for 12 continuous hours. So the state mandate is looking at not just AM, PM peaks, but for continuous service over a extended period. Basically, the kind of service that we have currently with the Swift service in Canyon Park, and that we will get with the BRT service, and some of the express bus routes meet that standard. And that's the standard that we use for the deeper parking deeper reductions allowed in the tier, the second level of reductions.
Okay.
And that's also we used one of those, the 2 trips per hour for 12 continuous hours a day is what we used for the reduction for corner house duplexes. And I am proposing in these code amendments to apply that to other middle housing types.
All right, and just to pick at that a little more, and that is regular schedule, not Sunday or holiday or any of that other stuff.
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you. Commissioner Westerbeck.
Thank you. Appreciate the presentation, Dave. I'm sure you've addressed this, but I always want to kind of clarify. I can see the bus stops, it covers sub areas like Canyon Park and downtown. If there's a conflict, or if there's a difference in a sub area like downtown or Canyon Park, is it kind of assumed that the more, whatever, the aggressive or the more reduced one, depending on the interests of the owner or developer, apply? Or have you guys already sort of vetted it so that they mesh properly, so the sub area code doesn't conflict with these proposed reductions? I'm sure we probably covered it. I'm just trying to remember how we dealt with that.
The current code that provides the baseline that currently in terms of any affordability is covered in Canyon Park and in the GDC affordability overlay, but elsewhere in downtown downtown there is no affordability requirement with the base parking requirement. What this will do is allow a developer in those areas to provide justification for going below the current requirement, together with an affordable housing requirement.
So sort of enhances the sub area code that's already there in the park, because I know they're different outside the sub area code. Okay, that helps me understand. Someone has to work with this sometimes. Like, well, which one applies? Oh, okay, this sort of enhances the sub area code, or like almost like an overlay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It is complex, but I'm trying as hard as I can with this table and the tiered approach to try to make it as simple and straightforward as possible. without taking away any existing entitlements that we have.
Yep. Eventually we'll just have the one line that says no parking requirements required anywhere. That'll be so much easier. I look forward to that day.
Thank you. Commissioner Dodd.
Until that day, Commissioner Westerbeck, I just wanted to say thank you for the table, Dave. I appreciated it.
Yes, it is helpful. Other, excuse me, other commissioner questions or comments? Commissioner Curd.
This is more of a deliberation than just a clarifying question. Is that all right?
Muted there. Perhaps we should, for the sake of process, see if there are any public comments, and then we can move into deliberation. Does that work?
Yep.
Because I
We
think
have no attendees.
Okay, well, good.
So I guess unless Jeff or Ashley want to weigh in.
All right, well, for the sake of process, I wanted to take that step. So moving on then to deliberations, Commissioner Curd.
Thanks, and thanks for the presentation, Senior Planner Boyd. Looking at the table especially, I think that imposing the prescriptive minimums on projects that require or that will eventually get a custom tailored parking study, it's a little redundant. And so I'm thinking that kind of how do we future-proof the parking code so that we're not always going back to it as well? Removing the prescriptive minimums from that section and just saying that it's subject to the parking study that they would do and approval by the planning director or building official. I think that would be a way to simplify a little bit more without having so many footnotes and so many so much complexity. If a project is going to get a tailored parking study for if this could be a duplex or something, I think that the risk of allowing projects without enough parking is pretty low, and a measure to control that risk or reduce that risk could be just approval and discretionary approval by the director. So that's my 2 cents. I do start to see that this scope is kind of creeping a little bit, and that the complexity is going up with every time we meet and see the code. And so just looking for some ways to make it a little bit more simple. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Curd. Yes, Senior Planner Boyd.
One of the reasons that I'm proposing the tiered approach is there was concern initially when we talked about further reductions as justified by a parking study. There was some concern about requiring a parking study to qualify for any reductions. So there are 2 reasons for the tiered approach. One is to basically establish the existing reductions that are there that don't require a parking study or any affordable housing requirement, and then to allow deeper reductions for projects that feel like they can justify it through a parking study. So that does add some complexity, but it also allows a project that just is okay with going with those the base requirement to go forward without the cost of a parking study.
All right, thank you. Other commissioner comments or questions? All right. Commissioner Curd.
Thanks. And yeah, thanks Senior Planner Boyd for the clarification. I guess my issue isn't really with the tiered approach. I agree that we should have across the board reductions. I've been a proponent from the start for reducing our extremely high minimums. But if we go to that second tier where we're requiring a tailored parking study for a project, I think that we should trust the experts and allow them to decide what the actual minimum should be. In the future, there's trillions of dollars in infrastructure budget coming through from the feds. We don't know what, I mean, we think we know that there's going to be 3 rapid transit lines in Bothell, but who knows, there could be more. There could be changes, and we don't want to have to keep going back to parking code to update or change it based on the best available science at the time. I think that we can just remove the prescriptive minimums in this second tier, as long as we require the parking study in that tier. As we could, if there's existing concerns or there's continuing concerns, I think that director approval could be that last and final seatbelt, if you will. But that's my thought.
Senior Planner Boyd.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. So I did consider not putting a bottom on the reductions in the parking study, and we can take another look at that, particularly if there's a consensus among the commissioners that's worth looking at.
Commissioner Dodd.
I was just going to say, I definitely would agree with that approach. I don't know if we want to take like a little poll or anything like that, but thanks.
Commissioner Westerbeck.
Just going to concur with Commissioner Curd that I think there should not be a base that's rely on the study, and because things will be dynamic, and that's fewer code changes. So I completely concur.
Right. Commissioner Gustafson, wish to weigh in, or?
Oh, sure. Yes, I agree. I do think we need to be honest with ourselves, though, that when you are purchasing a study from someone, they tend to give you the answer that you want. But since I am generally in favor of making things easier for people who want to build housing, I'm on board with it.
So, Senior Planner Boyd, I think you've heard a consensus from the commissioners to drop that down and defer to what the study says.
Yeah, thank you. And one other thing I wanted to point out, I should have pointed out in the presentation, but it's another reason that that we're proposing to continue this is I have included language in the code, and we've discussed this in the study sessions, of creating some simple criteria for parking study that would allow an applicant to use a tool like the King County right size parking calculator. And so those criteria basically say these are the data you need to enter into that parking calculator, and then that allows an applicant to do a parking study based on that without necessarily hiring an expensive consultant, and allows reviewers to also apply the same criteria to double check that parking study. The one problem with that, well, there may be 2 problems with that. One, we're discovering that perhaps that the King County isn't maintaining that parking calculator, and I need to do a little more research on that. And the other issue is that it's only for King County. It doesn't extend into the Snohomish County portion of Bothell. So I've actually submitted a budget request to have our GIS group and perhaps others in the city look into extending that calculator to cover the Snohomish County portion of Bothell. But that may be a bit of a stretch. But we are looking into that. So for now, the code says that in King County, you can use the calculator. In Snohomish County, you would need to hire a traffic engineer to do your parking study. And we'll look into, as an implementation measure, the possibility of extending that kind of a tool into Snohomish County.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Dodd.
Thank you. I think I would be remiss as a longtime Snohomish County resident if I didn't say maybe we want to throw that in our findings as like, hey, city council, please do fund that, because it needs to cover all of the city, not just the 53% in King County.
So is that a cue to move on to the findings?
Not purposeful, but yes.
Commissioner Westerbeck.
One last comment on the King County right size parking calculator. I like it. I use it. It's a cool tool. But I caution use of it in our downtown, with modern urban planning, which I'm very interested in and read about a lot and use in my work sometimes. The ideas flowing around about how we plan cities. To try and squeeze a lot of cars into our downtown area, where really we have a lot of money and pipes and wires and roads, we should be thinking about how to get a lot of people there and not necessarily a lot of cars, at least in the immediate downtown area and maybe eventually in the Canyon Park area. So the only bone I have to pick with that is, they're still saying, you need 1.5, 2, 3 cars per unit or something like that, just as an example, with the King County right size parking calculator. And so I feel like it should be better applied outside the immediate downtown core. And I feel like one of the reasons I'm on planning commission is I think that we need to make more room for people and less room for cars in our immediate downtowns for climate reasons and traffic violence and all kinds of other housing and all kinds of other things. So that's one place I think the parking right size parking calculator is a little generous with parking. We shouldn't be trying to squeeze cars in. It also is probably based on data now from, I don't know how much they update it, but last night, several people mentioned in the missing middle housing forum, millennials and younger generations are less and less interested in driving cars. So I just kind of hope that the calculator is keeping up with people's being less interested in driving cars going forward. And that's going to be dynamic change, I think, over time that we're going to have to keep track of. So I just wanted to point that out. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Other comments before we move into the specific findings?
If I might just make a point that if the way I've drafted the code doesn't say so, I will take another look at that requirement and make it clear that an applicant can do their own parking, so they don't have to use the King County right size parking calculator. The idea was to provide that as an option that might reduce the costs of parking.
It's great, and it's free, so it's fantastic. You don't have to spend the $5,000 or $10,000. So I do appreciate it. Don't get me wrong. I'm just cautious about it.
Yeah,
but it is clever.
I'll make sure that there's that's an option, not a requirement.
Thank you.
Great. All right, Senior Planner Boyd, would you like to bring up the findings, starting with 6 there, and see if we can run through them?
Yeah, would you like me to bring up the whole document?
Sure, I think we can be pretty quick through the beginning of it, though. It's pretty boilerplate.
Let me. Pardon my scrolling.
And page 43. All right, there we are. Yep.
So this is all pretty much boilerplate. When we met description of the action. The meat is in the specific findings that start with number 6 here.
Yes.
And the two that we've had a lot of discussion about are the citywide parking requirements and the interest in parking management strategies, which I've tried to capture in 11 and 12. 6, well, really 7 through 10 are the basic findings justifying the proposed code amendments. And then 13.
And I think those are important statements. I think the commission is very interested in having those be part of the record. So thank you for putting those there.
And 13 is I did include the finding about the right size parking calculator, but I could beef that up to include, well, there's 2 things we could do. We can beef up the finding, and we can also include it as a recommendation in addition to the actual code amendments.
Okay, so looking quickly, 6 talks about the specific findings, and I'll go quick and look if anybody raises their hand. 7, it's a sound land use policy, which we've discussed quite a bit. 8 talks about the benefit to developers justifying the housing requirements. 9 talks about tools available. 10, the reductions near corner lot duplexes facilitating development. 11, so we're talking about the scope, broader citywide examination should be undertaken, which I've heard from a couple of commissioners. Is that reflective of your interest there? Is it strong enough? Anything you'd add to that one regarding other work? Again, that would be for the future. Not seeing anyone raising their hand. 11 talks about parking management strategies. Again, we've discussed that quite a bit as well. Does that capture our discussion and intentions? Commissioner Dodd?
12, you mean?
12, yes, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, and I guess we'd have to see if everybody's on board with this, but I had talked about kind of, instead of calling it a parking management strategy, a transportation management strategy, so that we're not just looking at how a building can park cars, but how it can get people where they're going. So is there bike storage? Is there other facilities that would that are conducive to transportation without just single car trips and parking cars? So is there a way to throw that in 12 so that we're sort of reframing really what we're looking for is getting people where they need to go, not getting people to drive where they need to go?
Okay.
I'm gonna have to think about that a little bit. The parking management plan can include things like a development providing transit passes, or and we already require, at least in downtown, we require a significant amount of bicycle parking. So those are all strategies that could be part of a parking management plan. If we make this a transportation management plan, I'm just wondering if we're I just need to think that through a little bit further.
And that's fair. I'm not, like I said at the beginning of the meeting, I'm an account manager at a software company. So if that's like a term in planning, I totally might have missed that. I just worry that to readers like me who are not read in on that terminology, it seems very narrow in focus, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I can definitely consider that. I actually want to run that by our transportation folks in public works and just make sure that we're not getting into an area that going beyond where we necessarily need to go here.
Thank you.
And that particular finding does include reference to the transportation demand management provisions in the Canyon Park sub area plan.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. And again, our purpose here is to raise issues that we want further clarification or discussion on, not to adopt this language. So I think you got a little bit of feedback there, and you can come back and we can discuss it at our July 20th meeting. All right, so the next one is 13. So that's the one where I did hear some specific issues, I'll call them, particularly that the King County calculator doesn't apply to a significant part of the city in Snohomish County. So I think we would like to somehow bring that concern into this. I'm scrolling comments on that. Or do you think you got feedback already, Dave, to work that?
I think I've got good feedback on that.
Okay. And if we're all comfortable with what's been said thus far, recognizing we'll see it again, I think we can move from there. All right. So
the one question I would ask you though is, do you want to elevate those 3 findings that are beyond the scope of this study to specific recommendations? Sure, in the end, if it makes a whole lot of difference, and generally we try to limit the recommendations to the actual action that's going to be adopted with these code amendments, but we have done that in the past where Planning Commission has made recommendations to do further work, basically.
So comments to that question? This is your best opportunity. All right, well, I'm not seeing anyone raise their hand if I didn't miss them. So I guess, Dave, we are comfortable with those being where they are. We have raised our concerns and put them on the record, and they'll be part of what we adopt at the conclusion. So so I think we can close the share screen. Any other comments? Or is there a motion to continue this public hearing to July 20th? Commissioner Dodd,
I move to continue the public hearing to July 20th.
is there a second?
I will second the motion.
All right, it's been moved and second.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Curd. I was
Well,
just
it's been-
jumping in.
It has been moved and seconded. So all in favor of continuing to July 20th? All right, we've got a unanimous vote to continue. That will continue the public hearing and complete the agenda item concerning public hearings. I'm going to suggest that perhaps we take a 10-minute break at this point before the remaining items. I see concurrence. So it is 7:52 per my computer at 8:02. We'll come back and conclude tonight's meeting. All right, see you all in 10. All right, welcome back to the June 1 meeting of the Bothell Planning Commission. Coming back from a 10-minute break. We completed our public hearings for tonight. The next agenda item is study sessions, and we do not have any. So that brings us to unfinished business. The first item of unfinished business we have is OPMA Direction to Council, Open Public Meetings Act. Who's going to lead us on that one?
Dave and Nathan, I assumed I would be. Just okay. Dave, Dave, is that what we're expecting?
Yes, I wasn't expecting to do it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chairman Kiernan, and council members. Sorry, commission members. I'm having to learn all of this, man, and it's. The city council, as you know from your introduction and all, has adopted the local version of the emergency declaration that suspended the OPMA Open Public Meetings Act rules regarding in-person meetings. And that's how we all ended up in the Brady Bunch boxes that we've all been in for two years plus. Okay. The council is they have to make a decision. They have to decide whether they're going to continue that on a local basis, or whether or not they're going to not. And the governor's order expired today. And so if you do nothing, if the council does nothing, then this meeting, the council then can decide, I should say, they can decide whether to go full in-person public meetings like the old days, hybrid meetings, or stay 100% remote, as we've been doing for a while. So then they'll have to take that up. One of the things that came up last week was that they wanted to kind of hear from you guys. They want to hear from their boards and commissions on your preferences, your sensibilities, sensitivities about that sort of thing. And they really posed a very specific and a very simple question to you guys to talk about and to give us feedback to the planners and the staff here that we can take back to the council. And that was, do you consider it safe? Do you feel safe if we were to go back to in-person meetings where members of the public could come to City Hall, for example, and be in the room when a meeting is going on? Now, interestingly to that question is that the council is not saying that any particular board or commission member must be present directly, must be present physically in the room. You guys can all stay remote like you are now, and a person who came to City Hall and wants to participate in one of these hearings, we would have to set up a system for them to be able to sit in council chambers or wherever we decide. If it's small groups, we'll probably try to do them in one of the conference rooms, for example, that is got Teams linkages, and then they could sit in there and they could participate in the hearing. So I just want to make sure that you guys understand that if the council decides to do I suppose it's the hybrid or full remote option, then you guys can stay remote if you want. It's not an obligation to you, but it would require staff to open City Hall in the evenings whenever the meetings were, and make all facilities available to anyone in the public who might want to come in and participate that way. So I go back to the simple question. They said, do you feel that it would be safe for us to do that? And you can come into the meetings. That's the whole thing. It's kind of a weird deal, I know, but you can come into the meetings and sit in the meeting room and take public testimony and do the normal things that you guys normally do. So I open the floor to you guys to converse, and I'll do my best to answer questions. That was about the extent of the direction. I'll be perfectly honest with you. So I'll let you know if your question, befuddles me, and I will do something else. They would like to know by next Tuesday night, their next meeting on Tuesday night. Next Tuesday, the 14th. Sorry, I meant by the 14th. I'm already past one whole week. I'm a planner by nature. Anyway, that's the question. So I open it to you.
So Commissioner Dodd.
Thank you. I have two minds of this. Personally, I feel ready to go. I look forward to a meeting where my cat does not block the screen. But I am really sensitive to the members of our body that have small children or any relative, small or not, that is at risk, that are at themselves at greater risk of complications from COVID. We had some informal chat before the meeting about exposures and recovering. I had COVID in January, and I wouldn't have wanted to go anywhere near a meeting like this for a couple of weeks after, just to be super cautious out of respect for everybody that we work with. So I would like to see the option for members of boards and commissions and the public to engage in person, because remote meetings do exclude people who don't have the access to the internet to participate in these meetings. It can sound odd to people, especially I want to say like my age and younger, to not have that access, but that's a real thing in our community. So I would like to see that access resume, but I also would not want anybody to feel pressured or be required to come in. And I would include city staff in that. I think if there's staff that have those same concerns that we all have about themselves or their family members, they shouldn't be required. So I'm saying a lot of words to say I would like the option, but I also don't want my desire to have that option to force anybody into it. So I'll leave it there.
Other commissioners? So I have a question, Commissioner Curd.
No, I defer to your question. Sorry.
Okay, well, I have a question about whether the council discussed or has a position on masks being required or optional during these meetings.
I believe that that would be optional. I don't think that they're thinking of a mask mandate per se inside the city hall. There is not one now for staff. We're open 3 days a week and Mondays and Fridays by appointment. And it's individual's discretion.
Okay. Commissioner Curd, did you want to continue after I jumped in ahead of you?
Sure. All right. Yeah. Well, I am coming to you live from my new residence that does not have internet. And that's why I'm on my cell phone right now. And it just underscores kind of the privilege that I have to be able to jump onto a public meeting on my phone when so many people don't have access or are constrained by our current format. I will say I haven't done any like data digging, but it doesn't seem like we've gotten significantly more participation in our meetings or in our public hearings online than historically in person. But yeah, I don't know how that would change if we started allowing hybrid meetings. I don't really like how hybrid meetings work when I see them being done in other organizations that I participate in. I feel like one side or the other, either the in-person or the people coming in online, don't feel like they can participate to the same extent, or that maybe two different discussions are happening or so forth. So my preference would be to choose one or the other, but not do a hybrid. So I guess that basically means my vote would be in favor of sort of continuing kind of how we're operating right now, although that I don't think it's ideal, but yeah.
Commissioner Westerbeck, did I see you raised your hand?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both Commissioner Dodd and Curd. So, and those are two different opinions, I guess. I'm also ready to go back. It's fine with me. I'd wear a mask if I felt I needed to. I know a lot of the more modern HVAC systems are filtering out 90-something% of the contaminants. So it can actually be okay to be inside some spaces. And City Hall's not that old. Hybrid to me in some ways seems like if almost like it has to be like the only option in a way, because it seems like eventually we're going to probably go back in person. And but I agree with Commissioner Dodd. You can't, and I know Jeff also said we're not going to force anyone, staff or commissioners or public, to go in person. So it has to be that option. But I have participated in meetings that were hybrid, and it's true. Frankly, it's the people who are zooming in or teleworking, whatever you want to call it, and that seem to be forgotten during the conversations. So that's just my experience with a few of those meetings. So I don't know that I have any strong feelings here, but I do feel like it's probably time for us to get back in person. But so I will probably be willing to show up in person when it comes right down to it. So I will put that out there. I'm not sure I have any strong conclusions, but there we go. I know they wanted discussion.
Commissioner Gustafson, would you like to weigh in?
Thank you, Chair Kiernan, for asking. I really feel like the masking might be a sticking point. Having just gone through COVID with 3 kids and everybody having COVID, that was rough. So if I show up, it'll probably be with the N95 on.
Mhm. And I think this is important. The council asked the question is, would you feel safe, right? I mean, do you think it's a safe environment if you want to do this? And I think I've heard a number of you say, with distancing, I mean, the council believes that you can distance in the council chambers because it's a rather large room kind of thing. And of course you can wear a mask, and that's kind of the thing behind non-mask mandate environment, is people who feel the need to feel that it's more important and safer for them, and others, I suppose, will wear a mask, and that's okay. So I'm hearing, and do correct me, please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm hearing that you're you're saying that in-person meetings may be uncomfortable, but whether or not you think they're unsafe sounds to me like that's not what I'm hearing. So I want to make sure I'm clear and hearing you correctly.
Commissioner Dodd?
Chair. So I think it's as safe as anything else I'm doing out in the world, right? Like there's like a new definition of safe in COVID times. So yeah, I think the other thing I would add, because Commissioner Curd brought up a good point, that, and so did Commissioner Westerbeck, that hybrid meetings can be unbearably awkward. And pre-pandemic, I would have been like, absolutely not. Yeah. I've had so many terrible work meetings where it's like either the people in the Zoom get priority or the people in the room get priority. I think if we move to more permanent hybrid meetings, I would love to see, I'm not even going to say who, because I don't know whose job that would be, but like kind of like a protocol or best practices guide. And there needs to be really a facilitator in person and in the Zoom, focusing on both groups working together, like really intentionally creating a good space for public engagement. So I think that's not a question that council asked you to get information from us on, but I really think that's going to be so key to making it work. And I think if we know one thing as a body and as staff dealing with the public all the time, it's that if you make it too hard to participate, or if you make it more unpleasant than these meetings can be, as far as being somewhat dry sometimes, people are just going to disengage. And we want their feedback so much. So I think that's a really big thing, is let's not make it more unpalatable to participate for people. So that's I like having multiple options, in person or remote. Let's just not make one of them terrible. So that's all. Thank you.
Well, speaking rather selfishly as my current position as chair, I think it'd be real challenge. I find it, and as by the way, the generation that did most of our work before online meetings, I think it'd be real challenging for me to manage people in front, pay attention to what's going on there, have another screen. You know, as it is, you see my eyes wandering because I'm looking at other screens here. It would, at the very least, have the effect of lengthening the meetings. So I think that's an objective fact. So that's my concern there. I share the other sentiment that, you know, we're kind of in the new normal where when we go out the door, we're exposing ourselves to some level of risk. I will very likely be wearing a mask into the building as we do that. If we go that route as well, hopefully our sound systems will be sufficient to pick it up. Hopefully we're distanced enough. And if not, I may take it off to speak and put it back on. But I think there is a real yearning to get back together. And a recognition that there is a little bit of a risk we take in feeding that. So I don't know, that's my feedback. Anyone else? Commissioner Curd.
Thanks. Yeah, I concur with what you said, Chair Kiernan, completely. I'd also, I recognize that the feedback that we give, the council wanted to hear from us, but I'd also want to hear from staff who would have to be staffing the meetings. And I think that feedback is important for the council to hear as well, because I'm not sure, are all staff back in person for the time that the city facilities are open, or?
Well, no, not exactly. We're all here at least part of the time, Dave, notwithstanding. But he's got an excuse, a good one, by the way, just saying. We've given him some extra leash because he's, you know, trying to get this knee finished. Understand that. So I am sympathetic to where he's at. But as a general rule, most staff is coming into City Hall at least, I think, 1 day a week at minimum, at least in our section, right? At least I don't know what's exactly going on upstairs and all that, but they're coming in at least 1 day a week, and then otherwise remote. And that's mostly to foster, you know, that old fashioned water cooler camaraderie, if you will, right? That's mostly to kind of get that back together. I don't know where it's going to go. So staff wise, I will tell you you know, either a completely in-person model or a hybrid model does put a burden on staff. Staff has to deal with, they have to come in, they have to set the place up. We have to hire security like the old days, right? We have to go through all the normal things. And on the off chance that somebody might walk in the door. And you know, I think this is also a bit of an evolution. I think this is an evolving condition. We'll see what happens. But I think the council was just trying to get a sense of what the participating boards and commissions, where your sentiments were generally. I don't know, you know, I mean, you guys you've spoken pretty clearly, I think, and that's what they'd like to hear us bring back to them, is what you're talking about. I mean, and what your concerns are. I think they'll take that into consideration. You know, that's as much as I know. I think that's as much as I can tell you about the question.
That's fair. Well, I think, yeah, I've given my feedback, and I seem to hear a similar story from the others here too. So
I guess as best you can, I'd like to hear you encapsulate what you think everyone has arrived at here, so I can at least, and don't get me wrong, it doesn't have to be an absolute A or absolute B or C or whatever. but just tell, so I can say clearly what I think the majority of the quorum of people who are here tonight. What is your sentiment? There you go. Hope that helps.
That most people view a return to in-person meetings as safe insofar as they're allowed to distance and can mask in person. But there's a recognition that not everyone will feel safe. And so possibly in the event of hybrid or continuing to go remote, I think that we would be supportive of that as well. But I think that in-person meetings, if inevitable, there's not really, the people here tonight haven't expressed an opposition to that. That's what I've been hearing.
I'd agree with that. I didn't hear anybody say, no, don't do it, too risky. I heard some caution. And I think that's just reflective of the environment right now. I heard concerns about the hybrid because of the because of the effectiveness of hybrid meetings and the administrative difficulty of making them happen. So in light of that, I think there was a consensus that let's go back, and conditions could change.
Right. Yep. I think that's important to recognize as well. Again, I do think this is evolutionary. I think we're not, what do we know, right? I mean, this has been a wild ride.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I think
Nope,
I'll just say, make a quick statement then, Commissioner Westbeck. I think a solid majority of the commissioners have not met together in the chambers since, this whole happened. A number of new commissioners have never met in there. So, Commissioner Westerbeck.
I don't have anything weighty to add. I think I thought that you and Commissioner Curd summarized it well. And I think the bottom line is it's going to be imperfect and it's going to be messy. And we're just going to probably have to be okay with that. Because if hybrid is going to happen on occasion, because, for example, Tony is getting over COVID and maybe she'd say, oh, I feel good enough to participate in a week or something like that, for example, or one of us gets it. But I've got a hybrid in tonight. I think it's just going to be imperfect. So getting comfortable with that, like we have for the last 2 years. So I just wanted to say that, like, that's part of what I think we need to convey to them.
Okay.
I think I got it. I appreciate it. Hey, well, sorry, that's Chairman Kiernan's job.
Not a problem. That's part of the messiness of this process as it is.
Yeah, right.
Trying to figure out how to transition. So that was one item of unfinished business, direction to council, as squishy as it might have been. We also had another item of unfinished business, as indicated at the top with the minutes. We did have an ad hoc committee form to draft a letter to council. Would that committee like to report out?
I'm just going to jump in. We know that Chair Curd can't share the document from his phone, so I volunteer as tribute. I will share what we wrote as an ad hoc committee, if that's okay. I've never shared my screen in one of these meetings before, so bear with me a moment. Oh, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
See Nathan, right? Yeah.
All right, so I'm just going to add Dave and Nathan to this document so that you can share it as the hosts. And there you go.
Try again. I switched it on my end. Dave, can you, if you click the little arrow next to share screen, there's like a couple permissions.
Oh, I can now, so I can share it.
Okay.
Okay, let me intentionally pick the correct window here. Can you guys confirm that you just see the comp plan outreach document? Okay, awesome. So Commissioners Curd and Anders and I were able to collaborate on this somewhat asynchronously, but we did all get a chance to take a look and refine this. So this is our final draft to share with the commission at large. Chair, do you want me to read it, or do you want everybody to just read it? And then, I guess, what's the best plan?
Why don't you give us a moment to read it? Can you make it any bigger, or is that something I have to do?
Let me figure that out. 1 second. I forget that I have a very giant monitor, and that doesn't always translate.
Okay.
View. Let's see. How's that?
Good. Okay, give me an indication when you've kind of been through it. I see Commissioner Westerbeck, yes. Okay. So comments, discussion. Commissioner Westerbeck.
Captures, I think, what it needs to. I think it's excellent. I wouldn't change a thing. It's just what we need, I believe.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Curd.
Thanks. And yeah, thanks to fellow commissioners for putting in the time and effort to this letter. I just wanted to briefly summarize kind of our intent behind the letter. So the first paragraph is really kind of an introduction to what the Imagine Bothell comprehensive plan is, because there are some new council members. There's a lot of documents that they have to read through, and so hopefully that gives a brief explanation of the document. The second paragraph is talking about kind of our concern and encapsulating the need to include other voices in that discussion. The third and final paragraph, we took a little bit of liberty coming up with possible action items or giving some ideas. That wasn't really the goal of the committee.
Commissioner Curd, can you pause for a minute? I'm not sure everyone saw Commissioner Gustafson lost her video and thinks that the host needs to let her back in. So can you guys work on that? Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, thanks.
Hey, Nathan, and sorry, you guys, hold on a second. Nathan and Dave, I think if you jump off, if she just leaves the meeting entirely and then jumps back on, it will reset. Am I right about that? I'm not an expert in this, but what do you think, Nathan?
Yeah, she did just leave, so let's see if she comes back in. I didn't change anything. At least I didn't think I did.
Yeah, no, mine does this occasionally too, and then you just gotta leave and come back, and then it resets.
It worked, and we're back.
Great.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson, welcome back. Sorry for the interruption, Commissioner Curd.
No worries. Thanks for catching that. It's hard to see on my phone. The last paragraph is really what I think the ad hoc committee was looking for feedback on specifically, is that we came up with a couple of items that might spur some creativity. And we don't know whether that should be included in this document or if we should leave implementation wholly up to staff or council. So that's something that I'd like to just bring into the discussion.
So Commissioner, comments on that question, including suggestions? Seeing none, I'm good with having suggestions in here. I'll tell you, in my previous working life, I had some responsibility for recycling programs through the solid waste division, and outreach to multifamily homes is the toughest thing. It's very challenging. So I don't think we can emphasize enough the need to have that outreach and to think about different ways. And so I like it as written. So if there is, oops, there we go. If there is no other discussion, I think the next move would be a motion to adopt the letter as written and present it to the council. And what can staff to nod your heads or say, yeah, that's kind of how it goes. We have done a letter before, so yes. Okay, so is there a motion to adopt the letter as written? Commissioner Westerbeck.
Since I was not on the ad hoc committee, I'd be happy to do the motion. I would move that we make a move to present this letter to council for adoption by planning commission or by council from planning commission.
All right, thank you. Is there a second? Commissioner Gustafson.
Seconded.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion around this? All right, so I would ask staff to let me know when the next opportunity to present this to council. I know there is a agenda item feedback from commissions, I believe, on council agenda. I think this would be fine to fit into that item and get it to them as soon as possible. Also like to thank the committee for their work on this. We had a discussion. I think it very well reflects the discussion we had. So thank you for that. So with that, all in favor of the motion adopting this letter? We have all five. The letter is adopted. So when I receive the feedback on when this can be presented to council, I will do that and then report back to you at the meeting following that presentation. So thank you all. Commissioner Dodd.
Logistics question. So I did share that with Dave and Nathan. Is that good enough to get it to the right hands for our purposes here? Should I share it with you, Chair? Like, how do we get it to you formally?
I think that'll work. Sorry, I'm not trying to speak for you, Mr. Chairman, but at least on staff's end, we can reach out to the clerk and see how we can get on the agenda and when's the soonest we can.
But to the point specifically, Commissioner Dodd, I don't think it's an OPMA issue. If you send it to me, it's been discussed, and I'll look for any questions. It's been discussed and adopted in the meeting. I would like a hard copy, or being old and like paper.
I could print it out and bring it to you, but I will share it. And I'm just teasing.
Send it and copy staff because I suspect they would like it as well to transmit to council, and then I think we can take it from there.
Oh, it's a Karsten created it in SharePoint as a document. I'm going to lose all my terminology here. It's a cloud thing, so I will just add you to it, and then Jeff or Sarah Frost, do they need to be added too? Or I don't know which. I feel like our staff locus has changed quite a bit, so whoever needs it, let me know.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's multiple avenues that will work. And Nathan and Dave, I'm not used to doing this as far as getting things to council as hard copy. They don't do hard copy anything anymore, do they? Really? I don't think so. Is this a signature item? That's a question. I mean, as in a, either electronic or physical signature?
I don't think so. I think what our intent is to read this into the record. We transmit it to them as a public comment, as if it were a comment. I mean, it's a comment from the commission. but I'd like to give it the extra weight of actually presenting it in person.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't think you need to hand me a piece of paper that I hand to them.
Okay.
You know, in order to
I was
read it.
just joking about that. I'm sorry.
Then I think,
No, I
the
wasn't referring to your comment either.
I think then the electronic copy that Nathan now possesses, right, Nathan, you have it, you can, is it accessible, I guess is the big question. I didn't, the SharePoint thing and all that, Commissioner Dodd, I didn't understand that either necessarily. But if it's just a PDF or a Word document, that's easy, right?
Yeah, when Commissioner Courage shared it with me and Commissioner Anders from our city emails, you just click on the link and it opens up in Word through your browser. So I think you're good. I added you, I added Chair Kiernan.
Okay.
We can always collaborate further if needed.
Okay,
I'm probably overthinking this. That's definitely on brand for me.
All right.
Okay. Mhm.
Yes.
So,
And I
staff,
was able to open it.
okay, great.
I also checked the projected agenda. I couldn't find any scheduled time for board and commission reports, but
Oh,
we'll look into that.
maybe that was a one-time thing. I know it was on one agenda and I haven't looked that close.
No, I think you're right. It was supposed to be a regular thing.
All right. So I think that concludes this item of business then. We have a letter. Thank you, ad hoc committee, including our absent committee member. And I'll report back after it is read. So with that, that concludes our unfinished business, unless there's anything else I'm not aware of. So reports from staff.
We just wanted to give the commission a brief update on the plan for bringing forward comprehensive plan amendments, the annual comprehensive plan amendments that we are able to make. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Nope, wrong one. Try that again. So just a very brief presentation, and this is mostly just for your information tonight. So we wanted to check in on that we have at this point 5 scheduled plan amendments. Some of them are both plan and code amendments. There were we actually received 4 private applications, but one is actually being able to move forward under the existing parking reductions, since we were just talking about that, and some of the proposed parking reductions might also apply, but I think they're going to move forward under the existing reductions. And then there are 2 city plans that you've already had some exposure to, that we want to make sure that they get adopted by reference in the proper comprehensive plan elements. So the private applications, there are 2 private applications on either end of the downtown transition affordable housing overlay, which is the orange area with the black cross hatching here. The Drews application at the north end of this area with access from Thorsk and 96th, the corner there, is the one that you've had some exposure to. It's a proposal to provide housing for intellectually and developmentally disabled persons. And they're also looking into a project that would have a mix of housing. So might not be entirely for that population. They're really looking into some pretty exciting prospects. And the property that they have is just outside the downtown sub area. So that's where the plan amendment comes in. We would adjust the boundary. And then the other one at the south end, which we're referring to as a Hall Road application, initially included 3 parcels, but and also included an area outside the current sub area boundaries. Those the owners of that parcel have since indicated they want to withdraw their support, withdraw from the code amendment and withdraw their support. So so at this point, it's two parcels that straddle Hall Road, and both of these amendments would like to Planning Commission consider additional height similar to what was done in the general downtown corridor overlay, where the planned action ordinance did the environmental impact statement, I should say, did examine a 4-story construction. Right now, the height limit is 3 stories. Parking reductions, and it's possible that the amendments that are being considered will address that for them, but we may actually give some special consideration with these, and some potential use changes to allow some commercial use, in one case perhaps to provide work opportunities for some of the population, one in the other case to potentially consider incorporating a cafe into a historic house on the southern property. And these code amendments would likely apply to some degree to that entire downtown transition affordable housing overlay. So for that reason, when we do bring this to Planning Commission, we'll also initially, the plan is to bring it to Planning Commission prior to doing any public notification, to get the Commission's feedback on whether to do notification to properties within 500 feet of that entire overlay area, in addition to the parcels being considered. I'm not asking for direction on that now. I'm just explaining that's going to be our approach. We were looking at bringing these to you before the August break, but one of these applicants actually requested to wait until after the break, and the other is willing to go along with that. And we have quite a bit of work piling up before the break as it is. Plus, sometimes it's awkward to start a new item just before the break and then come back afterwards. So that's 2 of the private applications. The third private application is known as the Frulo property. It's currently being used by a construction company and storing a lot of trucks, dump trucks and such, on the parcel outlined in red here on the left. And they've identified adjacent areas of interest, because we told them that whenever we consider these, we also look at whether it makes sense to expand these code amendments, and in this case, a rezone. And what they're looking for is to add a residential designation to that property that's currently zoned office, professional, and general commercial. So this is in that area that we talked about with the parking reductions. That's likely going to be within a half mile of the future Swift stop, and so we think this one has merit. All of these would increase the capacity to some degree, and therefore we would certainly consider and likely require affordable housing mandates with these. In the case of the other one, we may look also at some voluntary incentives that could apply. With this one, we've also heard interest in addition to the adjacent parcels on the east side of Bothell Everett Highway. We've heard interest from a developer that has the properties indicated with the blue arrow on the left on the west side of Bothell Everett Highway. So there may be some interest in expanding across the way as well. So again, partly for those reasons, we want to get, when we first bring this to Planning Commission, we want to get some feedback on how we should notice this and what area we should consider. There's a possibility that we could bring this one before the August break, but like I say, the calendar is filling up. This is the one issue that might be good to get a little feedback from Commission about whether how you feel about starting an item just before the August break, because the likely dates are well, the likely date is July 20th, the last meeting before the break. And then there, in addition to those, there are the two city plans that have already come before Planning Commission, the water service plan and the bike plan. The bike plan is coming back to Planning Commission in a study session on that last meeting before the break, July 20th. These will need to be, the water service plan will need to be referenced in the utilities and capital facilities elements of the comprehensive plan. And the bike plan will be referenced in the transportation element. So those, I think, are going to be pretty simple comp plan amendments, but all 5 of these will have to be packaged together and adopted at the end by council together. Hopefully by the end of the year, although the state has provided extensions for items that are well into the process, but need a little additional time. So I think that's it. Yes, I'm going to stop sharing. And
you asked a specific question of us, whether we would prefer to, or whether we'd like to have that one property Ferrillo, I believe, start before the break and then continue after the break, or wait on that. So commissioners, on that question, do we have feedback? Commissioner Westerbeck and then Commissioner Curd.
I'm perfectly happy to tackle it before the break if there is time. If it feels like it's a squeeze or it's a tax on staff, then it's not necessary, but I think it'll be pretty straightforward. So I'm fine with it.
Commissioner Curd?
I was just going to echo those comments. Yep.
And I see a thumbs up from Commissioner Dodd and Commissioners Dodd and Gustafson. And I would add to that, it's not unusual for us to have a first hearing of something and then wait a couple of weeks, couple meetings to follow up. Case in point being parking reductions. We'll hear it again July 20th. So I also concur with Commissioner Westerbeck's comment that if staff can prepare it, get it rolling before the break, then let's do it. If it's too much of a burden to cram it in when you have other things you want to meet the deadline on, then I think we can defer to you, but we're game if you are.
okay, thank you very much. That's the feedback I wanted. I'm also still waiting to hear back from that applicant about the options. So we'll weigh all of that and make a decision by the time the July Imagine notice goes out.
Great. Any other reports from staff?
Not from me.
Looking across the screen. All right. Did you want to say a word or two about the middle forum yesterday?
Thank you for reminding me. I did intend to mention that. I know that several planning commissioners were there. We had a good turnout, over 30 participants. I guess that included staff and consultants, but so at least over 20 citizens. And I think we got a lot of good feedback, different feedback than we seem to be getting from the online survey, which has tended to be negative. The feedback at the forum was generally positive. And it's all good. That's the whole reason we're doing this, to get all of the feedback, and so our consultants will be scrambling the survey closes June 6th, next Monday. So people that attended the forum or heard about it and wanted time to think about it, have the weekend to complete the survey. Anybody listening tonight that hasn't done it, I encourage them to do it. And so when we bring this back to commission, we will, on the 15th of June, we'll have at least a preliminary report on all the feedback that we've received. And the morning of the forum, we had over 100 responses to the online survey. So we're pretty pleased with that. So.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
Hi, Sarah Gustafson here. Yes, it was really interesting to be at the meeting. A lot of people seem to say that they were interested in the reforms in theory, but they were concerned about how it would play out in the details, but at least they were interested in the theories and the ideas behind this work. My question is, can we see the survey results? Will they be published?
Yes, they will. Hopefully we'll have a full report for commission that'll be in the packet for the June 16th. But we may not be able to do it for the packet because the survey closes on Monday and the packet goes out on Thursday, but we'll at least try to have it for the meeting, if not in the packet.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to guess that concludes reports from staff then. Reports from members. Looking across. Going once, going up. Commissioner Curd.
Thanks. An update on my cottage housing experience. That's going to be in the June 15th, or what month is it? June 15th meeting. So stay tuned.
Great. So staff will then have that on the agenda, or will that be a report from members?
We are working through that, and I will get clarity on that after this weekend.
Great. Just let me know what to say. Thanks. With that, any other reports from members? Seeing none, items to report to council. We do have our ad hoc committee report, which we will present to council when we figure out administratively how to make that happen. Anything else we'd like to get feedback? Seeing none, I think we had a productive meeting, a lot of interesting discussion. Is there there being no further business, however, is there a motion to adjourn? Commissioner Dodd.
I'll move to adjourn the meeting.
And I think you're the winner of most motions tonight. Is there a second? Commissioner Gustafson.
Excuse me, seconded.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we adjourn tonight's meeting. All in favor? I see all commission members voting in favor of adjourning the meeting tonight. So the June 1st meeting of the Bothell Planning Commission is adjourned at 8:56. Our next meeting is June 15th. We'll see you all then. Good night, all.
Thank you.
Good night.
Everybody.
I'm expecting
Thank
my
you.
motions prize in the mail, by the way.